Hello, hello, and welcome to Penguins Lunch, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. I'm your host, Nick Brlansky, and every other week we are joined by a very special guest. And this week it is Danny Shirey of DK Pittsburgh Sports. What's going on today, Danny?
Well, I got to tell you, man, hockey season is right around the corner. We got rookie camp starting up next week and training camp the following week. So I'm ready to stop sitting around at home all day waiting for a trade and signing to happen and ready to get back to the rink.
Luckily for the Pittsburgh Penguins, the roster seems to have been taking shape. There could be a couple other moves, but you know Ron Hextall, we're not going to know that until the second it happens. So it's still kind of waiting on bated breath to see if there's any last-minute additions or last-minute moves for the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I would be surprised to see any substantial moves. I'm not expecting them to go out and, move a D-man or two to bring in like an impact, winger or something like that. I just don't see that happening. Mm-hmm. It was funny. Before they went out and acquired Petrie, I asked Hextall, you got 9 defensemen on your roster, you're probably not taking that many into next season. He's like, yeah, that would be a pretty safe assumption. And then after he went out and traded for Petrie and Ty Smith, they're still left with 9 NHL capable defensemen. And then when he was asked about it, he said, well, we're going to take a look at what we have here. And he didn't assert that he was going to make another move. So I'm sure that if they had an opportunity to maybe move on from one of these defensemen, that they would do it. But I think if something good enough had come along, they would have already done it by now. So I really think we're going to see, I don't even necessarily want to call it a camp fight for one of those defensive spots, because with the way the salary cap situation is right now, they're going to have to send a couple of guys down that probably don't deserve to be in the AHL to start the season. But as far as that goes, I think maybe a guy like Ty Smith and even Drew O'Connor up front, because they're waivers exempt, they might start the season in the AHL, and that would make the Penguins salary cap compliant. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I don't necessarily see them going out and making any other substantial moves.
Mm-hmm. So like you mentioned, training camp is right around the corner, 2 weeks from tomorrow, in fact. But before we get into any discussions about that, I do have to ask you, because I ask everybody that comes onto the show, what is your favorite lunch spot in the city of Pittsburgh?
Ooh. I'm going to give you my favorite brunch spot instead, because my father has off every Friday. He actually just moved back to Pittsburgh. He grew up here, but he just moved back to Pittsburgh when I moved here. And he's off every Friday. So every Friday we go down to a spot on the north side over by the Mexican War Streets. It's a little brunch spot, hole-in-the-wall spot called Lindo's. But you can get everything you could possibly want in a brunch spot for and as much as you could possibly eat. You leave there stuffed, and it costs you basically nothing. So I really enjoy going over there. I know it's probably not the most popular choice, but it's a good spot for me.
That's the good thing about when I ask this question. I don't get the Permanis or the Peppies. You get these little spots that, you never would know if you just went in once a year, twice a year. So it kind of just builds up a list of places that I need to visit once I get back to Pittsburgh. So I appreciate you adding that one in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many little spots here, and Pittsburgh just has so much great food that, I come from Columbus, which is like the haven of all the food franchises. So any chain that you could possibly want, you could go find it here. And here I'm like, I don't know where I'm going to go get food or whatever. And then you just end up stumbling into a place and you're like, this is the best food I've ever had.
It's awesome. I know I definitely miss it. I used to live in Pittsburgh, but let's get into the Pittsburgh Penguins talk, shall we? I know you just released a piece on Jason Zucker, and his tenure with the Penguins has seen several injury roadblocks, but you've been on record backing him as a key piece to this Penguins team if he's able to stay healthy. If that is possible for this year, what do you think his ceiling is in 2022-23?
Well, I'll preface all this by saying that, yes, I have been pumping Jason Zucker's tires for each of the past several off seasons, and that hasn't exactly worked out. But the one thing I just want to put out there is that fans, media, whoever it is, we've got to stop expecting Zucker to live up to his $5.5 million cap hit. It's just not going to happen. And, if the Penguins were going to trade him, like I said, with one of the defensemen a little bit ago, if they were going to move him and found a package that, wouldn't really take away too much of their draft capital capital or hurt them in the prospect pool, they would have already done it.
Mhm.
But as far as looking forward to next season, obviously the guy has to stay healthy. If he's not healthy, he's not doing them any good. But how much do you really want to blame him for his injuries? Of course, it's tough to sit here and see that a $5.5 million player isn't making it into the lineup. But at the end of the day, a lot of these things are outside of his control. And just knowing him as a person a little bit, that's a guy that really wants to be out there and cares so much. And that's why we saw him out there during the postseason when he clearly wasn't 100%, giving, everything he had in him. But looking forward to this coming season, I have a feeling if he is able to stay healthy that he might be a pretty serviceable offensive depth option for the Penguins. I still don't think he's a great fit with Malkin, but whether he's on that second or third left wing spot, I think that he could produce a fair amount of goals again as long as he stays healthy. And the reason for that is because last season he saw a pretty big uptick in his chance generation and the rate at which he created quality chances. His first 2 seasons in Pittsburgh, well, his first season when he played with Crosby, he obviously did pretty well in that 15-game stint. But the following season, the Penguins just got absolutely cratered when he was out on the ice. They were not possessing the puck anywhere near the level that they needed to be, and he quite frankly just didn't look all that great. But last season, the Penguins actually controlled play in a pretty big way when he was out there, and everything, again, he wasn't in the lineup for a big portion of that, but when he was in the lineup, the Penguins controlled play well, and he generated a pretty strong amount of chances. The puck just wasn't going in for him. And, I'm sure we could look back to several breakaways where we're like, how the heck did that puck not end up in the net? But Zucker has been a plus finisher, and what I mean by plus finisher is somebody that converts on a higher frequency of their chances based on what you'd expect from those chances. So Zucker's been a plus finisher nearly every season of his career. Last season, he rated as one of the worst finishers among forwards in the entire NHL. So if I've learned anything, it's to expect that a plus finisher who has a down season is probably going to see a rebound, at least to some extent, the following season. So again, if Zucker is able to stay healthy, I think the Penguins and the Penguins fans are going to be much happier than they have been with his time in Pittsburgh.
Obviously, health has always been the number one storyline for Jason Zucker since the trade. But when I look at him, especially when he played last season into the postseason, I look at a guy that is one of the best Penguins without the puck on his stick. He's one of the guys that goes in, plays the forecheck, plays the back check, extremely physically, extremely hard. And he does get opportunities. Like you mentioned, though, it's just a matter of him being able to, one, stay healthy, obviously, and two, be able to finish those opportunities better than he has in the past couple seasons.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, just watching the guy, you can tell how much he cares, and there's not anything out on the ice that he isn't willing to do. And we've heard Mike Sullivan say over the years how much he loves guys that are willing to do what it takes, and Zucker embodies that in a way. Like you said, he's willing to go grind out in the corners. He can make some plays. He, aside from last season, has shown an ability to finish. He's willing to get in on the back check and make those tough defensive plays, even if it's not necessarily going to lead to a direct chance going the other way. So, again, he's on the wrong side of 30 now. I'm not expecting him to go back to his heyday or his prime like he was playing when he was with the Wild back in 2017 or so. But there's a good player in there, and it all just boils down to him staying in the lineup.
I want to transition now to Tristan Jarry because the NHL Network releases their top 10, top 20 lists every year, and it's always a subject of debate. I think I was surprised to not see Jarry on that list as one of the top 10 goaltenders, especially because last season he finished in the top 10 in a lot of the major goaltending statistical categories, especially goals saved above average and just goals allowed average in general and save percentage. So I was surprised that he wasn't on that list. What do you think Jarry's biggest weakness is heading into this season, and why do you think he doesn't get that national acclaim that some people in Pittsburgh would like to have him get?
Well, I might be taking some people off guard with this, but really, has Jarry done anything to really establish himself as a top 10 guy? And to your point, he did have some very strong regular season metrics last season. But let's take a look at his body of work outside of that. He's been roughly a league average to a slightly below league average goalie during his regular season time, and his one postseason series was one of the worst goaltending performances on record in the modern era.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard for me to sit here and criticize, especially the national media or even like the NHL Network people that are putting those lists together for not including him.
Mm-hmm.
Because going into last season, let's not forget that there were a lot of people that were very concerned about Jarry's performance, and a lot of people that didn't even want him back with the team. So he definitely deserves a ton of credit for the season that he had on the back of that awful postseason performance. But at the same time, if he was out for the beginning of the postseason round against the Rangers as well, except for Game 7, which we didn't get much of a look at anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, outside of that, I'm not sitting here and saying that he's going to regress to a league average guy or even be below league average. I think he could be a top 10 goalie in this league again. But as far as his perception outside of maybe Pittsburgh and the region here, it's not all that surprising to me that people aren't as high on him.
Mm-hmm. And I think when you look at that list, there's a lot of names on there that even though they didn't really have the numbers, especially in the regular season last year, they did stuff like you mentioned to grab the national media's eye. I look at a guy like Jake Ottinger, his performance in that series, despite not having the best numbers in the regular season, he was just above Casey DeSmith in goals saved above average. But when that playoff light shined, he was really good for the Stars in a losing effort. So I think there's something there where Tristan Jarry has not really been there when the light has shined. I think the best thing that he's done at a national stage is either his performance in the All-Star game, which, as we know, is kind of moot point to most national media experts, and really his one shutout performance against the Rangers last year on a random matinee Saturday. That was the biggest thing that he's done. So maybe that's what he needs to do besides putting consistent work in, is shining when the lights are the brightest.
Right. And again, I'm not trying to paint some doom and gloom here. I'm just trying to provide a little bit of context as to why he might not show up on a list like that, because, this really is a what have you done for me lately league. And I guess that's just true across sports in general. But, what has he done? Yeah, he had a strong regular season, but outside of that, he didn't have a crazy postseason series like Ottinger did, like you said. So, it wouldn't surprise me moving forward if he is a top 10 guy throughout the regular season again, but I'm still waiting for his redemption series during the postseason. And I'm probably going to be holding my breath in that regard until I see it.
I think you're along with a lot of people in that aspect, but let's talk about training camp, because we are 15 days away. It kind of seems like it was never going to come. For some reason, this felt like a very elongated offseason, even though it was just as long as, if not shorter than all the others, because the playoffs started 2 weeks late last season. But with 15 days until the opening of Penguins training camp, who are you going to keep an eye on early in camp?
Well, the one guy, and I've actually got a column coming out on him tomorrow, so I won't spoil too much of it, but the one guy I really want to watch is Ty Smith. He came on as a rookie with the Devils 2 seasons ago, put up pretty good point totals for a defenseman, let alone a rookie defenseman on a not so great New Jersey team. And then last season, he just fell off the rails, and the Devils just got dominated when he was out on the ice. And, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm entirely familiar with the Devil system and their structure and everything like that. But from what I've seen, it was pretty rough. So I'm curious to see what his training camp will look like, and especially what it'll look like after he's had some time to work with Todd Reirden. I'm not going to sit here and say that Todd Reirden has the capability to just go out and fix any defenseman he gets his hands on, but we've also seen with guys like Cody Ceci and even Mike Matheson, who just had a career season, that under Reirden, that they can, or Reirden can at least seemingly get the most out of these guys. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on Smith, because if he pretty clearly has some offensive capabilities, and if he can put all of that together, especially routing out some other areas of his game, I think that would go a long way, because outside of Owen Pickering, who the Penguins just took in the first round, the Penguins don't have many, or really anybody, as far as defensive prospects are concerned, that, even project as guys that could maybe play in the NHL someday.
I know another guy on that list would be P.O. Joseph, who realistically you mentioned is one of those 9 NHL caliber defensemen. I had Nick Hart on the show a couple weeks ago, and he said, listen, he's shown us over the past 3 seasons that he is pretty much ready for the NHL, but there's so many guys that are in that system that he hasn't really been able to make his mark. He enters training camp with a chance, if he can impress, to potentially get that. Do you think P.O. Joseph going into this camp is going to be able to make his mark in that way? Or do you think he's going to be another guy, like you mentioned, that just suffers the fatality of contracts and being easier to send back down to Wilkes-Barre?
That's a tough question to answer because I do think that Joseph at this stage is good enough to at least be an everyday player on the Penguins' third pairing. The concern that I have is how the actual combos would shake out on defense. So assuming that Dumoulin and Letang are going to be playing together, and assuming that Pedersen and Petrie are going to be playing together, that leaves Ruda probably on the right side, and then your plethora of other guys to fill out that sixth spot. So if Joseph is in a situation where he is playing with Ruda, I think that would be a pretty strong pairing because Ruda is a stay-at-home defenseman. He's good in his own zone. He can make up for some of Joseph's lack of size in the defensive zone, and especially in the net front area, and really allow Joseph to focus on some of the things that make him successful, which is keeping the puck on his stick and breaking the puck out of the zone. But, if the Penguins have other plans for their pairings, I do have a little bit of concern about Joseph maybe playing with a guy like Petrie or even Letang for the same reason that he finds success, and that's that they all thrive with the puck on their stick. And, we've seen time and time again defense pairings that don't work out because guys either don't know how to read and react off each other because they're used to doing one thing, but their partner's doing another. But it's really tough. I think Joseph has a spot with this team at some point. I just don't know if it's going to be right out of camp again. It's really tough to say what they're thinking. And who knows, maybe a guy gets injured during camp or in one of the preseason games as well. But looking forward, I definitely think Joseph has the capability of at least slotting in and providing some positive impacts on the Penguins defense.
There's two other guys on the forward side that going into camp, I know I'll be keying in on and looking for updates on, and that's Sam Poulin and Philip Hollander. Even though I don't expect them to make the team out of camp, you would expect that both of those guys would see some NHL action this year. Poulin, of course, had his first pro season last year, did not go well to start, and then everything turned around about halfway through. He had a great second half, so does he build on that heading into camp? And Hollander, last year, he was quoted in saying, "I'm here to take a spot." And Nick Hart, right before we left, threw a little nugget in there. He said, "I would not be surprised if Hollander's closer than most in getting one of those final spots on the roster." So what do you think about those two guys? And who of the two do you think will end up being more of an impact maker on the NHL roster this year?
Well, as far as making an impact on the NHL roster this year, I'm going to have to go with Hollander. I think he's more polished, but I'm going to take this, and I don't want people to view this as me taking a dig at Poulin because, like you said, he did make some pretty big strides in the second half of his first pro season last year. But the thing I worry about is that he's more of a skill guy, but I don't know that he projects as a skill guy in the NHL. So what I mean by that is if he were ever going to be, a top six forward, we probably would have seen a little bit more of an indication that was on the way, which means that his role is going to be somewhere in the bottom six. And I don't know that he possesses a lot of the qualities and traits that are necessary to be an effective bottom six player. Obviously he's continuing to develop, in another training camp, being around the big club, I'm sure will do him well. But I just don't know that the rest of his game will be good enough to warrant him, taking up a spot on a third or fourth line for the occasional offense there. I mean, when you look, yes, you need offense throughout your lineup, but at the end of the day, when you're getting down to your third and fourth line, you need the guys like Zucker, like we were talking about earlier, that are willing to do those things and do them well. And I'm just not sure that Poulin is that guy. But that being said, I do think both of them will at least see some NHL action this year. On top of those guys, there's also Valtteri Puustinen, who I'm probably higher on than both of those guys, and think he should really be at the top of that list that's, right on the cusp of getting into the lineup. And on top of Puustinen, the Penguins still have Drew O'Connor and Radim Zohorna, who have played pretty well once they've made it into the lineup as well. And they're no sure things to be in the lineup because of the salary cap situation as well. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how all that shakes out.
Well, we're here talking to Danny Shirey of DK Pittsburgh Sports. Danny, thank you for giving me a little bit of your time. I want to finish with these quick dishes that we like to do at the end of every episode. Some of them hockey related, some of them not so much. So if you're ready, we'll get started with that.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. The first question: more exciting time of the hockey calendar, beginning of the season or beginning of the playoffs?
Oh, beginning of the playoffs, no question.
Yeah, I think that one's I gotta take that one out of the rotation. That one's getting the same answer across the board. So I think we have the united front answer on that through the first 5 episodes. But better summer cookout food, burgers or hot dogs?
Burgers. Hot dogs are foul. No offense to anybody that eats hot dogs, but hot dogs are foul, man. Like every time I look at one or even think about, I can't do it. Hamburgers all day with some Colby Jack cheese.
Oh, there you go. All righty. What position would you play if you were in the National Hockey League?
Well, back in high school, I played a lot of center. I wasn't a great skater, but I know the game well enough to know where I was at, especially at the high school level. So I played center quite a bit, and I played a little bit of wing. But whenever I had to jump back on D, it did not go well.
No, that's an entirely different skill set, especially when you mention, not the greatest skater always. That defense is so much harder, especially in the skating aspect.
Yeah, well, it was so bad. Like I would try and defend guys off the rush because my backward crossovers were just not good at all. So I would play an extremely loose gap and try and step them up at the blue line or something. And by the time I did that, I'm just getting twisted in knots. So yeah, if you ever invite me to come play roller hockey or ice hockey with you, do not ask me to play defense. I will do it, but you will not be happy with the results.
Noted. Other than the Pittsburgh Penguins, who is your favorite team to watch?
I think it might change this coming season, but for the past 3 or 4 years, I've always really enjoyed watching the Maple Leafs. And I think that's almost entirely just because I love watching Austin Matthews. I don't think there's ever been anybody I've seen that makes me feel some type of way about the way that they can shoot the puck. But there's just this feeling that overtakes me every time he does one of his patented toe drag wrist curls to the top corner. Like that, it just gives you like, that's what hockey's supposed to look like kind of feeling. And I just found myself drawn to him at any chance I got. So I've watched a ton of the Leafs over the past several seasons.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I mean, you can say Alex Ovechkin, of course, but it's been a long time since we've seen somebody score at that pace, at that will. I mean, it's almost too easy for Austin Matthews at points.
Yeah, no doubt. It's crazy too. I would go as far as to saying that he could even improve on his goal scoring pace from last season. He typically starts the season really strong. I think he's got one of the best goals per game rates in October in NHL history. And last season, he like barely scored in the first couple weeks of the season. So if that trend recontinues this coming season, I don't see why he couldn't push for, another 65, 70 goals.
Yeah, he missed the first couple of games of the season, if I remember correctly, last year, dealing with a wrist injury or something like that.
Yeah.
And there were a couple people that were saying, well, I don't know about Austin Matthews this year. Well, obviously, he made them look stupid as the year went along. But last question for you here, Danny. Again, thank you so much for giving me some of your time today. Which would you rather do, golf with Mario Lemieux or fish with Sidney Crosby?
That's a tough question because I'm not a golfing or fishing fan. Okay. I would probably choose fishing with Sid just because I am awful at golf, like incredibly terrible. If I go to Top Golf with my friends maybe 2-3 times a year, and no matter what I do, I've got the meanest right slice you have ever seen in your life. Like I get to a point where I'm like angling myself to my left just so that I can get the ball to go where I want it to go. So yeah, I got to choose fishing. I'm not a huge fishing guy. If I catch anything, I'm probably going to make Sid take the fish off the hook because I don't like wet, slimy things like that. So yeah, I'll go with fishing with Sid.
All righty. Well, that is Danny Shirey of DK Pittsburgh Sports. Danny, let our listeners know where they can find you on social media. And you already mentioned that you have a piece coming out tomorrow. Just let us know what's coming up for you at DK Pittsburgh Sports.
Yeah, so over at DK Pittsburgh Sports, I'm working the Penguins beat there with Taylor Haas. She does a phenomenal job, and I think we make a really good team. I've got a weekly analysis column called Drive to the Net that drops every Thursday. On top of that, we've got other analyses and columns that are there on top of the news that we're reporting. And if in case you're not a subscriber there or don't know where to find that, I put all of my content and all the work that we do on my Twitter account, and my @ is @Danny Shirey PGH.
All righty. Well, one last time, Danny, thank you so much for coming on to Penguins Lunch today.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thanks so much.